What is going on, everybody? Today we are going to jump right on into our Premier League predictions. We just got past deadline day. Well, it is deadline day. The deadline's done, and we're going to jump right on into the new season. Tomorrow, Liverpool play Norwich to open up the season, and we are going to get our predictions in. So sit back and get ready. Let's go. All right, we're going to start with number 20 here, and I'm liking Brighton to hold up the table this year. Now, this one is going to get a bit controversial with some people. Now, there are a couple reasons why I'm actually putting Brighton here. One, I think they've not necessarily downgraded at manager. This Graham Potter, I think, with a side he can mold, like a top 10 kind of side, plays good enough football to hold off and have a good year with a team that's pretty good. Like if you were to go to, let's say, an Everton or maybe a West Ham, I can probably like a West Ham, somewhere, a team in that nature, I think they can overachieve a little bit. The problem Potter has, I think, is that his football style doesn't fit necessarily to a team that's going to fight relegation, which I think Brighton are going to do. I think Houghton was a better manager for that specific kind of fight. Now, I do think Graham Potter, I don't want to say he's a downgrade, and I don't want to say he's an upgrade because they're two different types of managers. I think he's a downgrade for where Brighton are, and I think he's an upgrade for where Brighton want to be, which is fine. But I don't think they're there yet, Brighton. So that's why I think they're going to struggle, because they're going to come in and he's going to change the football around. They're going to have to gel quickly. And not only that, he's going to try and outplay teams. And the issue I have with a situation like that is that I don't know if this team's good enough. They've made some good signings. Aaron Moy comes in from Huddersfield. I think he's a really good signing. Moy was really good for Huddersfield the last couple of years. Matt Clark, who did immediately go out on loan. Maupai, the Brentford striker. They've paid a lot of money for some of these. Webster, Trossard, Maupai. The issue I'm going to have here is that there's only one player in there who's really Premier League experience. For a team who's going to fight relegation, I think it's imperative that you bring in Premier League experience. I think you bring in players who've done it in the Premier League, and I don't know if Brighton have done that. They've bought in some players who I think who are going to end up being pretty good. I think Maupai is a decent striker. Trossard will be good in the system Potter wants to play. I just don't know if these guys are ready for this kind of relegation scrap. They snuck through a little bit last year, a lot of games. They finished pretty low down the table, and it's going to be a tough year, but I'm tipping them to really hold up the table. 19th, I'm going with Norwich. Now, Norwich have had a decent window. Farman and goal is a good signing. Dermich is a pretty decent signing as well. I think the best bit of business is Amadou. He came in late in the window on loan from Sevilla. But I've picked them to become 19th because I'm not so sure that their style translates to enough points the way they're playing it, or the way they were playing it in the championship. Obviously, when you come up from the championship, if you win the league, you're playing a little bit more expressively. I wonder if there's enough firepower to grind out results against some teams. Obviously, they're going to be sitting back a lot more than they were in the championship. Is the defense good enough to handle Premier League opposition week in and week out when they're kind of just sitting back and really sucking up pressure the entire time? There aren't a ton of quality defensive acquisitions here. Farman and goal is a good option, of course. They bought Sam Byram in permanently. Amadou can sit deep in midfield or play center back. It's iffy. We'll see where he ends up playing. But the one issue that Fulham had last year, who spent all that money, who came up, they never addressed the defense. And while a new goalkeeper comes in, I'm not so sure this defense could really handle all that pressure for 90 minutes week in, week out against Premier League opposition. And I'm not so sure the front line, even though Dermot has come in, Patrick Roberts it's a decent signing as well on loan from City. I'm not so sure that there's enough firepower here to score enough goals to keep them up. And the final relegation spot, we're going to go ahead and tip Newcastle United in this spot. Now, this is a weird one for me. I was iffy on whether they go down. A lot of people like them to bring up the table, finish in 20th, mainly because of how it's happened. The squad isn't brilliant. We'll go ahead and start there. It's not great. They've bought in some decent players. Of course, they've let a player or two go, obviously. Iosi Perez is gone. Diame's gone. Osuelu's gone. And Perez is really the main issue there. And you have to wonder where this goes. With no Rafa Benitez, they bought in a couple of players. Kraft at right back. Jetro Williams, a player that a lot of people tipped to be really, really good at one point. We'll see how good those two are at the wingback positions. Andy Carroll's come back. We'll see about that. Joelinton, a lot of money paid for Joelinton to play up front. You have to wonder, as reports going around, that Rafa Benitez didn't even want Joelinton at the club. So we'll see about that. St. Maximin, I do actually like St. Maximin. I think he's a really good player. So we'll see how this turns out. I don't think Steve Bruce is that great of a manager. And we're tipping him to go down here. It's just a weird feeling I have that they might stay up. But logically, this feels to me like they're going to go down. I think almost, if they do go down, the season would have started poorly right when Benitez was let go, where they could let him go and he could go wherever he liked. It's started right there, and everything kind of just seemed to go downhill from there. And then Perez left, and it just kind of snowballs, and we'll see if it snowballs into the season. We're going to have them 18th here. We're going to have them going down, but I have this sneaky suspicion they may stay up. Steve Bruce is pretty decent at least making his teams a little bit compact. So we'll see how it ends up working out. I'm not too hopeful. It's just more of a feeling I've got. But we'll end up seeing what happens. But for this scenario here, really, that's about as high as we can go with Newcastle, 18th. In 17th here, we've got Crystal Palace, just avoiding relegation. Now, they've had a weird window, a relatively quiet window when it comes to ins and outs. They've had a loud window when it comes to Zaha, who had multiple teams bid for him. A wild bid from Everton toward the end there, 70 million plus Tosun and McCarthy, which amounts to 90-ish million, somewhere in that area. And they've rejected that, and we'll see how this plays out, mainly because, as we talked about, not a ton going in and going out. Wan-Bissaka, really the only major player to leave, the right back, and then James McCarthy comes in. They buy Ayew out, and then Camarasa, who had a really good year for Cardiff. If you didn't watch any of them last year, he's actually a really good player. But other than that, they've really just bought in the two midfielders and kept Zaha, and it seems as though obviously Zaha wins them. Probably that's their deal of the window. They've gotten a lot of money for Wan-Bissaka, but they've also really did well in keeping Zaha. I have this weird feeling with Zaha that he's going to be down a little bit. He put in a transfer request toward the end there. He wanted meetings with the owners and things to try and get out of there. And to be fair to him, there have been people sniffing around him for years, and he's done well and Palace have done well to keep hold of him, but this kind of seems a bit too much. And we'll see if that affects his mood. He wins. He's like Hazard at Chelsea, wins them a majority of their points, and he's the best player on the pitch almost all the time. So we'll see what happens there. I think they get off to a slow start. I think he gets off to a slow start, and they kind of work their way in and just survive. But this is the team with Newcastle that was flip-flopping. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this team, and we'll have to see where they end up. But just above relegation is where we're going to leave them. In 16th, we've got Sheffield United, another team who was automatically promoted, but a team I feel will fare a little bit better than Norwich in a variety of different ways. I think they've got a little bit more firepower up front. They did well last year, of course, coming straight up, but they were scoring goals, scoring nice goals as well. And there's no change in manager there. There's no change in manager at Norwich either, of course, but there's no change in manager, so we'll see if they could keep that up. Of course, they're going to have to be a little bit more defensive, as we were talking about with Norwich. I just think a lot of what they did in the market will help that a little bit more than Norwich did. I think they addressed the back line a little bit better. Of course, bringing back Dean Henderson. Besic on loan, the deep-lying midfielder. They took in on deadline day. I believe they took him in yesterday or today. Bringing him in from Everton on loan is a good one. Jagielka is a good one. Plenty of experience, and while he may not have the pace anymore, when you're going to be sitting back a little bit, having someone with experience is a little bit better than necessarily the pace if your line is deeper on in your half anyway. So we'll see how Jagielka pans out. He's always been a good defender, so we'll see. But they've also done well upgrading in a variety of different places. Up front, Musette, of course, comes in, and McBurney, I think, gives you a little bit something different, big man, and we'll see what happens. I think they overpaid a little bit, but it's priceless being in the Premier League, so we'll see. Of course, bringing in a couple of standouts from the Championship as well, Luke Freeman, Ben Osborne, Callum Robinson, so we'll see how they end up. I think they're just going to scrape by, though. I think they've got a little bit more going forward, and I think they did a little bit better at the back to address what will be a major part of their coming Premier League season, and that is sitting back and soaking up pressure. In 15th, we have Burnley. Now, this is a team I've struggled placing in our predictions here. Now, I've struggled placing them mainly because they had a really poor year last year, and they've kind of just escaped toward the end there, and they didn't do a ton in the transfer market. But Sean Dyche is someone who lives for this kind of stuff. His football lives for this. And eventually, if Burnley, of course, want to go a little bit further, they're going to have to evolve a little bit, whether that means Dyche evolves and changes his style just a tad, or they bring someone new in. I have a hard time believing Dyche is someone who you can fire without a little bit of uproar, but another 3 or 4 years of this would definitely do it, I think. But at some point, they're going to have to spend a little money as well. They haven't done a ton of that in this window, bringing in a replacement for Tom Heaton and Peacock Farrell from Leeds. Eric Peters, someone who can defend. He's a decent player, of course. Danny Drinkwater in on loan is probably their best signing. He's a little bit more creative, but he's also got a little bit of steel in there, so he's a really good option in the midfield. And then Jay Rodriguez comes in from West Brom, and I think their best bit of business is that Tarkowski doesn't go. Tom Heaton leaving is tough. I've always liked Tom Heaton, though he is getting up there in age, so we'll see. About their goalkeeper situation, of course, though, with, it's one of those things. He's done some good for them, so it's kind of more of a sentimental thing, but we'll see where they end up. I think they have a little bit, with the players they've bought in, they have the ability to be a little bit more expressive. I think Danny Drinkwater is a really good signing. He comes in on loan. But as we said, at Leicester, he was ever so creative, and he was on the cusp of the England team, getting called up a few times as well. And I remember when they went to that World Cup, it was kind of an annoying thing that he didn't go. So he has the ability, and this is a really good signing. Whether they could be a little bit more expansive going forward, we'll have to see, but he can definitely bring that along with him. And, of course, Jed Rodriguez has been playing some good football for a pretty decent amount of time now, so That's always a good signing to have. So we'll see if they can score a little bit more, be a little bit tighter defensively. This last year, maybe it was just the amount of games they had, but they were a little bit leakier than they normally are. So we'll see if they get back to that sort of steel, those clean sheets, and we'll see if they can stay up this time around. In 14th, we've got Southampton. Now, Southampton had an indifferent year last year. They weren't really part of the relegation fight necessarily, finishing 11 or 12 points ahead, but they were the lowest of the teams to not be in the real scrap. And their window was it was all right, I suppose. They didn't do a ton in the window. Of course, they had to buy out Danny Ings. Shea Adams comes in, as is Genepo, the standard Liège player. Now, this team, it's at the moment, it's kind of set up okay. There are a couple people coming back from loan, a couple good players that'll be back with the team. Whether they play enough, we'll end up seeing. But there are some good pieces here at Southampton, and I think they're going to do a little bit better than they did last year. They had no major players to leave. I mean, Target is gone, but, you know, nothing massive from Southampton, which is kind of new for them because they seem to get plucked clean every window. But I think a quiet window for a team lower down the table, bottom half, that doesn't lose a bunch of its stars, is a good window. We'll see if the new winger is good enough to take them a little bit further. Of course, Danny Ings is finding his feet over there and doing decently well. Shea Adams is a decent player as well, so we'll see. But I like Southampton to have a pretty good year, a better year than last year, and it's almost one of those moments with Southampton where they kind of just get a breath. They've had a couple of years in a row where their transfer windows have been hectic, and you're always worrying about which players are going to go. Big clubs coming in for players of theirs, but they've had a bit of a breath, and the squad has stayed together, so I think they have a little bit better year than they did last year. In 13th, we have Aston Villa. Now, everyone, I imagine, was wondering where I would place Aston Villa if you're watching this, and Aston Villa have gone and done a Fulham, where Fulham went ahead and spent loads of money and bought in tons of players, and then their season didn't end up too well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put Villa at 13th, and there's a massive reason why. Fulham last year, after coming up, spent all that money, some good midfielders in there, Michael Sarri and some other players who, there were some good players bought up into that team. Now, the biggest difference I see with Villa and Fulham is the defense. Fulham it seems like it's been 2 or 3 years with Villa or Fulham where they haven't addressed their defense. They didn't really address it too well over this window either. And January, no, it's been 3 or 4 windows now where the defense just hasn't been addressed, and it's their weakest point by a pretty large margin. Villa, on the other hand, have bought in some pretty good players. Bjorn Engels, the center back, Tom Heaton is a really good goalkeeper. One I rate pretty highly. Nakamba sits right in front of that defense. Matt Target is a good one. Made Mings permanent. Konsa is a good center back to bring in as well. They've spent money on the defense, which will be, if they're in a relegation scrap, will definitely be an important part. Fulham, when it got down to it, just leaked goals. There's some good players they've bought in otherwise going forward in midfield. Wesley's a good player. Trezeguet, we'll see. I've never rated Trezeguet as much as others seem to have. Jota's pretty good as well. Douglas Luiz is good in midfield, for those who haven't seen him play. So there are some really good upgrades all over the park, but I think Fulham with a really good defense, or if they spent 40 million across the back line last year. I think they have a different year. So I'm going to go ahead and think this time round that Aston Villa, who's went ahead and followed Fulham's mark, except they've upgraded the positions that need upgrading the most when you come into the Premier League, I think, from the Championship, and that is the back line. And I think they've done that, and I think they have a pretty good year. In 12th, we've got Bournemouth, a team who had a bunch of wild results last year. A lot of drubbings and a lot of games where they beat the hell out of teams. And it was just a really, really odd season for them. And one thing I see them struggle with a lot is going away from home. At home, they're really good, and away from home, they're like extraordinarily bad. So that obviously needs to get fixed. So we'll see if that gets fixed. I think really they're a lot better than the teams coming up. I think they're better than a lot of teams in the division, so I don't really think they're going to be fighting relegation per se, but 12th is probably where we have them. They've actually gone out and done some really good business, some smart business, I think. Danjuma, I'm not super sure about. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not sure who he is. Philip Billing is a really good signing, I think, from Huddersfield. The midfielder there. Lloyd Kelly at left back is a really good signing. And Jack Stacey, for those who don't know, I think is also a really good signing, the Luton right back. And then Harry Wilson as well, who a lot of people thought was going to stick at Liverpool this summer, is come in on loan for the year. No option to buy because I believe Klopp sees his long-term future at Liverpool. And he had a really, really good year for Derby last year. I just think they've done some really, really, really good business. Just smart business. Mings is left permanently, and Mousset wasn't super imperative in their team, has left permanently as well. I don't really see those as huge losses, and the players they bought in, it's just really smart business. And I think if they can correct their away performances, I think they're going to have a really good year. We have them in 12th here, but they're in this sort of range, 10 to 13, as I think is really their, 10 may be their ceiling, 13 may be their floor. I think they're really firmly mid-table. The next three, including the team we have here in 11th, so 11, 10, and 9, I feel these three are very interchangeable. I think here in 11th we have Watford. I think they can finish 9th, 10th, 11th. I think these three are interchangeable. I'm going to go ahead and put Watford here at 11th. Now, Watford is a team I thought would do a little bit more business. Obviously, they broke their transfer record buying Ismail Yassar, but I thought they were just going to do a little bit more business. They were pretty tight not defensively in the market. They didn't let anybody major go, and they did bring in a major player, I think, in Sarr, but they also didn't spend a ton of money outside of that. They bought in Craig Dawson, Danny Welbeck. I think they could have used another pretty good center back. They did really well in keeping Decore, and Ismail Yassar, for those who haven't seen him play, is a really good player, and I firmly believe, I'm not sure what the fee was, around 30 million. I firmly believe they've underpaid here, and I have a hard time believing that in 3 years he's still going to be at Watford. He is really, really good, really young, and he's going to be an absolute pain for defenses. They're going to have, in reality, a really good team there. They're going to have Sarr on one wing, De La Fey, who I've always thought was a pretty good player, on one wing. We'll see how well Danny Welbeck fits in. He's obviously got to be fit, but it's a pretty decent coup, I think, if you can make him keep him fit. He's always been a player that tries. He's always given his all. Always played well for England for some reason. So we'll see with Danny Welbeck. I think their downfall will be with the defense, but the front, everything in front of that is really good. Midfield, obviously, Decore didn't leave. Pereira's still a good player, and then the two wingers. There is a lot of talent here at Watford, and I think another 2 years. If they can keep the core of this player around, they're going to be really good soon. I really think they needed to upgrade the back line a little bit, of course, as we've said. So we'll see where Watford go going forward. But the ambition's there, I think. I just thought they'd spend a little bit more this window. But we'll see how they play out. But I like 11th as a decent spot for them, mainly because I have questions about the back line. But other than that, there's a really good team here, and we'll see where they end up. But 11th is about right for me, I think. In 10th, we have got Everton. Now, some of you may be pretty surprised to see them a bit lower. I know they've done a lot of good business on paper, I think, is what this business is. Sidibe's pretty good. Coming from loan. Lasso's a good backup, of course. And Fabian Delph is a decent signing for the money they've paid. Now, this is where things get a bit weird for me. I don't rate Iwobi, especially at that price. 35 million, I think it was. That is a wild number for Iwobi. And while Iwobi has flashes and he's got pace, there's a lot about Iwobi that isn't as technically great as anybody would like it to be, of course. Gambabin, I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's just got big boots to fill with Gana leaving. Gana really kept Everton ticking. Him and Gomez did a pretty good job there in midfield. But Gana did a lot of sweeping up, did a lot of moving the ball as well. So it's big shoes to step into. Not saying he can't or anything like that. It's just Gana left a pretty big hole, and we'll see if Madman can fill it. And then Moise Kean or Kien, I think is how you actually say it. This one is a tough one for me to evaluate because I think he's going to be really good eventually. But I don't think he's going to come into the Premier League this year and just light it up. This is one of those signings on paper that looks really good, and it will end up being really good. But whether he's firing on all cylinders right off the bat, we'll have to see. He was scoring goals toward the end there for Juventus, playing around a really good team. A team miles better than Everton are, I think. So we'll see how he fits in. He's going to have to do a little bit more graft work. He's going to have to be playing defenders that are, physical, of course. Of course, they're physical in Italy, but a lot of those fouls don't get called over here in England as much. So we'll see how, of course, he handles. He's going to have to play a little bit further through than maybe you would over in Italy, of course. And as I said, this is not a bad signing. This is a signing that I don't think will be ready right off the bat. So maybe they start off a bit slow and then work their way into the season a little bit as things go on and everything gels. Their bid for... There's a lot of ambition here. Their bid for Zaha was huge. An absolutely massive bid, and I'm personally surprised that Palace didn't take that. 70 million plus the player they wanted in McCarthy that they paid 8 for, and then Tosun, which I don't know what they value that at. It's close to 90 million they wanted or they put up for Zaha. There's ambition here at Everton, and it almost feels newfounded. It's almost come in one big go. I just think they've stretched a little bit with Iwobi, and I just don't think Moise Kean is ready to go at this second, which is not to say he has a million times. I can't say this enough. I don't think he's a bad signing. I just don't think he's ready this second. So we'll see. They had a weird last couple of days. They had bids rejected for Zaha, Decore, Smalling. They tried to get Rojo in as well. There is ambition here. They've left it a little bit late for my liking to go in for some of these. If they would have signed everybody that they wanted to sign, Decore, Zaha, I imagine if they signed Zaha, they would have left Iwobi to Arsenal. Decore is what I said already. Decore, Zaha. There's a lot of money that's just popped up here for Everton. It's almost like they've been saving it because they're kind of tight with it most years, but it's just starting to pop through, and everyone's kind of looked over at Everton and gone, whoa, where's all this coming from? The new stadium they're thinking about building, or they're in the process of turning into reality, or whatever it was. I've seen videos of that thing. It looks amazing, the stadium. So we'll see where Everton goes. I think the ambition's there, and we'll see what ends up happening. Just this year, I'm not so sure they get off to a bright enough start to really keep that challenge up on a Europa League spot. So we'll keep them at 10 for now. At 9, we have West Ham. And as we said, West Ham, Everton, Watford, you can probably interchange them a little bit. I'm going to give West Ham a little bit of edge here. This window for them, it almost seems like it was a little bit quieter than they normally are. But they've done some pretty good business on my account. Sebastian Haller, who's a goal scorer, and if you were watching Frankfurt games in and out, Jovic was the flash, but he was the power, the finishing. He is a good player, and he was outshined a little bit by Jovic, who's gone off to Real Madrid. But do not underestimate this dude. He is quick, powerful, clinical. He is a really good player and a really good buy. They may have, it's a lot of money, but we'll see. He's a really good buy. Pablo Fornals is also a really good buy at 23. Just a really good player, very creative. He's got the strength to hold off here. Their new front line looks really, really good. Really good, excuse me. Ajeti's come in on deadline day. The striker, they needed a striker, really, and then Arnautovic forced his way out. So they bought in two pretty good ones. And, of course, they're pretty decent along the other areas of their team. I think they upgraded in midfield a little bit. Striker, they've upgraded. So we'll see. They've got good players already on left wing with Felipe Anderson and things. So we'll see how this works out. But I think they've done some shrewd business here. Paid a lot of money, but paid a lot of money for talent. So we'll see what happens. No huge outs. Obiang goes out, though he seemed like he was going out for the last 6 months. Arnautovic, a bit of a pain, but he's been replaced by someone who I personally think is a bit better. So we'll end up seeing what happens here. But West Ham have this model, it seemed, where they were buying a bunch of players and trying to spend as much money as possible to keep up on just fringe players from big teams. I think they've changed it a little bit this time round, and they've gone ahead and bought some really good players for teams that aren't necessarily top 3 or 4 in their league, and we'll see how that works out for them. But a change in a bit of transfer policy here, and we'll see if that helps them out. But the ambition's always there with West Ham. It's just, can we get it all to gel at the same time? But this time, 9th, about where I see them. Number 8, we have Chelsea, a traditional team challenging for that top 4 spot, and may come as a surprise to some of you, but for a lot of you who watch a lot of Chelsea may see this as I see it. Eden Hazard leaving is the, how do I say this, the biggest outgoing player of any team in the Premier League. And what I mean by that is that he contributes more to what Chelsea do, to me, than any other player that's gone out in this window. Hazard scores goals, he creates penalties, he creates a chunk of their chances. The best way I can do this is for anybody who's watched MLS. I don't personally, but when Almiron left and Atlanta started their new season, they had a lot of trouble scoring goals. And one video, and of course players, you don't necessarily see how good players are when you watch highlight videos like this. But I didn't watch one of those highlight videos. I watched one of those videos that showed all of Atlanta's goals throughout a single season. And Almiron was a part of like 80% of them. And then he left, and then new manager and things came into Atlanta, and they struggled mightily to start scoring goals. And Almiron is such a massive part of that team, and then you just took him out and didn't replace him with anything. Hazard is such a massive, massive part of Chelsea. And when he's not playing, it's almost as if they're completely void of ideas. Pulisic is a good player. He is nowhere near Hazard's level. And I think they'll find that out relatively quickly at Chelsea. He's got potential to grow, but I don't think he's going to get anywhere near Hazard's level. And I don't think he's going to be as creative as Hazard was. I don't think they're going to almost have to change completely the way they play. If you just watch Chelsea play, when Hazard's not a part of it, excuse my cat, when Hazard's not a part of it, they're so stagnant and everyone's just struggling so much. We'll see with Lampard. Lampard's another manager who, like Gerrard, has almost certain to come back to his parent club, and he did. I just think he's come a bit too soon. We'll see if he's ready for this. I just don't know if there's enough here. They've had a couple players come back from loan. We'll have to try and help them out. I just don't see it. I don't see enough here to replace what Hazard bought and get them into third or fourth. I really, really do not. And I just think, Chelsea always have one of those years where they struggle. One every 3 or 4 where they have a really bad year. It just feels like a really, really bad year for Chelsea. No upgrades on a team that almost fell into third. Well, they finished third. Tottenham fell apart at the end, and I think they almost by default beat out the other two. I think Arsenal had a really bad year. Another team in United who had a bad year as well. It was like almost nobody wanted that 4th spot, and Chelsea kind of just snuck in and took it almost by default, winning a couple games toward the end. I just don't see enough here. I think they're going to have a worse point total. I think they're going to have worse goals scored, and I just don't see it here. And this is where I'm going to keep them, right here in 8th. At 7, I have Wolves coming in here, a team that did really well last year. And I think they're going to upgrade on that. They've just come into the Premier League last year, and they were kind of getting into terms with it. Found a way into Europe last year. That may hinder them a little bit, depending on how far they go. It looks like they're going to get through this round, and they'll end up playing Torino, I think. If they can get past Torino, they'll find a way into the group stage, which may hinder them a little bit. Depth-wise, there's not a ton of depth here, but they've bought in a little bit. Not too much left. Costa and Cavallero are gone, but other than that, not a ton. And they've bought in some pretty good players. Jimenez is permanent now. They've bought in a partner as well, Catrone. That's a really clever signing for me, I think. Dendoncker is permanent now. Bruno Jordao is coming from Lazio. He's going to be a good player. Neto as well. For those who haven't watched Neto at Lazio, the youngster, he's going to be really good. He is going to be really, really good, and that is a really shrewd signing there on their part. But they've done what a lot of teams in this position should do more of, where they've not let a ton of talent go, and they've just let the team gel a little bit and bought in some really good business, a couple of players, 4 or 5, and just push them into the team, and the team molds itself together and gels, and it ends up having a really positive effect. And I think Wolves have done that here. I think they're going to stick here in 7th, but very soon Wolves, with the money they've got, the ambition they've got, really soon they're going to be challenging for spots above this. Up in 6th, we have Leicester City. Now, I debated putting this team a little bit higher, but we'll stick them at 6. Another surprise, if some of you want to call it that. But this team has had a really good window, I feel. I know Harry Maguire's gone, but I think everybody knows that Harry Maguire isn't worth the money they bought in for him. I think his price is inflated. Of course, he had a really good World Cup, but what made Maguire have a standout World Cup is how many set pieces he was a part of. The goals and the chances created with his set pieces, or with his head from set pieces, of course. He's a good defender in his own right, but nowhere near the 80 million they've paid for him, I feel. I think that's good. Rodgers said it. I think it's really good business. But people underestimate how well Leicester did to end the season when Rodgers came in. Whether that was a new manager bump or not, they were playing some good football. And they've added some really good players. Rosie Perez is a good player. Dennis Pratt, I'm not sure how you say it. I normally call him Dennis. So we'll see. It's Pratt or Pratt. The Sampdoria midfielder, he's a good addition to the squad. James Justin is a good addition. Luton, the right back. He will be really good. And bringing in Tielemans permanently is such a good bit of business. He is a really good midfielder, and we'll see how long he sticks around here. But that is a really good bit of business, and they've done a really good job over this window. We'll see if they struggle defensively, but I don't think the next player up, I forgot his name, is going to be a massive, noticeable step down from Harry Maguire. But the additions they've made are really good additions. They're getting younger, which is good. And they're currently in this position now where they need to start pushing to go further up the table. They're slowly lowering the age in the squad and bringing in some class players. So we'll see. But I think they have a really good year. They play really good football under Rodgers, so they did at the end of last season. I think this continues, and I think they have a bit of a surprise year, up in 6th. That's where I like them to be. Here in 5th, we have got Arsenal. So now we know the top 4. Arsenal to just miss out for me. They have had a window that has been, I don't know how to say it. It almost feels strange, the way their window has gone. I think from a business standpoint, Iwobi's going out on the final day to Everton for almost 35 million. Is insanely good business. Koscielny leaving, I think, is weird business for them. Of course, he wanted out, but he's a good player in his own right. I just think the defense as a whole is not very good. I don't think David Luiz comes in and is a massive upgrade back there. He likes to roam a little bit, and the defense is poor enough for me. Tierney upgrades it a little bit on that left side, but the center of defense is a huge problem for me. Whether it gets better next year when Saliba comes back from his loan, we'll see. There's some good players going forward, of course. Ceballos is pretty good. We'll see what happens between him and Ozil. I don't think they can both play. Pepe, of course, is the big money signing. We'll see, of course. I just have a hard time finding where all these players fit in. I think for a team as frail as Arsenal at the back, playing Pepe, Lacazette, and Aubameyang, plus maybe a midfielder like Ozil or Ceballos, I think that's suicide for a team that poor at the back. I'm just not sure how he's going to go about this, and I'm not so sure Emery finds a way to go about this. Not because these players can't play together, but I have a hard time believing, after the way last year went, that Emery is even that great of a manager. He's done well at Sevilla, but he had a whole year last year with this Arsenal team, and even toward the end, he didn't know who his best 11 were, and he was always mixing and matching and trying different things. And after a year, that's troubling to me. Obviously, it's not his squad, and he'll like to check players out and things of that nature, but toward the end of that year, they were challenging for 4th, and there was a bunch of games there that were winnable where they didn't collect too many points from, and he just to me doesn't have a grasp of this squad. And we've bought in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, it looks like. I'm not sure if Martinelli, and it doesn't look like he's gone out on loan anywhere. It's just, we'll see if he can get this squad playing the way he wants to be playing with the players he wants out there on the pitch. I just don't know if he's got an idea of where he wants this squad to go. It almost feels like they obviously wanted a winger, but then they never bought in any proper center backs. David Luiz has come in and on a 2-year deal. It's just a make weight almost, or a makeshift signing just until they bring someone else in. The center backs are just not good enough. They are just not good enough. And I think they get exposed there again. That's the reason I don't put them in 4th or 3rd. And there's also a reason I don't put them, or it's not a reason. It's one of those things where I was thinking about swapping them and pushing them further back down the table out of 5th. Pepe is a good player. I don't think he was their first choice. It's a ton of money, and he played a lot of football last year up front. It's gonna be strange to see where Emery really puts all these players, but we'll end up seeing Pepe is a good player, a tricky guy. He's very, very quick, but we'll see really what happens here. There's something strange about the way they seem to be building their squad, so we'll see. But for now, 5th place. In 4th place, we have got Manchester United. Now, I've fiddled around with where I wanted to put this team. On certain days, I kind of want to move them up a bit, and on certain days, I want to move them down a bit. But we're going to keep them here at 4th. I think they just sneak into the Champions League. They've had a pretty decent window. I think they wanted to bring in another striker. Dybala never ended up happening. I don't know if Dybala would have. Dybala's a weird player to me. Sometimes he flatters to deceive, I think. The money he wants, the attitude he has, I'm just not so sure he fits in for that kind of money at a really big club, so we'll see. But Lukaku going out was good business to get as much back as they could. I really rate Lukaku on teams where he could run. That's what made him good at Everton. That's what makes him good at Belgium. He's more of a standstill target kind of guy at United, and I think that's down to how they play football. He just doesn't fit. He really doesn't. On those old where he would be really good? On those old Real Madrid teams from a couple of years ago where they used to soak up pressure and then just burst at you. He would have been really good on one of those teams. Just these teams that hold on to the ball nowadays, he just doesn't fit on teams like that, and he didn't fit at United, so they've done well to get as much money for him as they did. I think letting Herrera go for free is a really poor bit of business. I've always rated him, but they did well otherwise. I think they would have wanted to bring in another midfielder. Daniel James is a pretty good bit of business. Wan-Bissaka wildly upgrades right back. And Harry Maguire, though he isn't worth this kind of money, I think he wildly upgrades center back as well. I think they're pretty thin up front, and I think they're pretty thin in midfield. And I'm personally, I don't particularly like United, but I'm personally glad that Rashford's going to get more opportunities up front. I think that's where he's best. His finishing sometimes is a bit wayward, but I think he's best up front. Martial, I think I personally would play him up front also. But there'll be more opportunities for him up front as well. So we'll see how that unfolds throughout the year. My reservations about this team is that I don't think Solskjaer is a great manager. So we'll have to see. Pogba, of course, is super hit and miss. There are games where he's up for it and he plays really well, and then a good chunk of the time you can just see he has zero interest. He wanted to leave this summer, so we'll see how that affects his attitude going forward. It's just with Pogba, I don't think he's going to have one of those years where he's really good. I think he's going to have one of those years where he just doesn't care until he gets that move that he wanted to get. So we'll see with that. I think letting Herrera go for free and not bringing anyone else in, and then carrying Pogba as a passenger could be a massive issue for them, which is why I was fiddling with moving him down a bit. So we'll see with United, but that's probably where I kind of see them. I don't think there's enough in Chelsea or Arsenal to really outdo United here. It's almost by default they're kind of put in fourth, but we'll see as the year goes on. But fourth, it's a decent spot for them. In third, we have Tottenham here. I don't think they're quite good enough to challenge. Really push Liverpool and City, but I also think they're wildly better than everybody below them. So I think they're going to finish in. We'll see how their year ends. They always seem to go on this weird little slump toward the end of the year and kind of slip a position down like they did last year and end up in fourth. It's just something they tend to do. So we'll see if they really push, but I think on their day they're 10 points better than fourth, and 10 points back of second, so I kind of like them in that position. But they've had a window that could still be a bit hit and miss for me. I think Lo Celso is a good player. I think they only bought him in because I think they expect Eriksen to leave. He is not anywhere near Eriksen, but he is a good player. He's good to bring in, of course. Jack Clark's a decent bit of business. Ndombele is a really good signing. For those who haven't watched him play, this dude is really, really good. He is wildly upgrading that midfield by a big chunk. He is creative. He can tackle. He is tough. A big man. It is a really good signing, this Ndombele. But I'm not so sure he lifts them from a position like that into a spot that's challenging Liverpool and City necessarily, because I think with Lo Celso coming in, I find it hard to believe that Eriksen won't be leaving. I find it hard to believe for a team like Tottenham, who is very much about their wage structure and things of that nature, that they would spend £65 million on a player that's not going to play. He's a midfielder that's a little bit further forward. Eriksen plays further forward. Dele Alli sort of plays further forward. There's a lot of players that cannot fit together there, so there's going to be a lot of money on the bench. And while a big team needs that sort of depth, I'm not so sure Tottenham like to spend that sort of money, so I think Eriksen's gone. And the problem with Eriksen leaving is that would be the biggest thing to happen to Tottenham this entire window, because he is so important to Tottenham. When he's not playing, it is insanely noticeable. They don't create nearly as much when Eriksen's not there. And when they play with Eriksen there, it's almost like they're waiting for him to open up the defense with one of his balls. So we'll see how that goes. Sessegnon has also come in, loads of potential, but kind of underwhelmed in his first year in the Premier League. So we'll see where that ends up. I think I thought they were going to bring in another right back after they let Trippier go. Not necessarily. And up front, I'm assuming they're going to play Son up there if Harry Kane's not fit, but I'm not super sure where they go. I think they needed another striker for me, but we'll see what happens. But I think they're firmly in third place, and we'll keep them there. In second, we have Liverpool. Now, Liverpool didn't do a whole lot of business. Mignolet went out. Backup goalkeeper Nadrian came in. Harvey Elliott. Jesus, can't believe I can't get that name out. Harvey Elliott comes in. He's not necessarily ready for the first team yet, but he looks a decent little player. Vandenberg, a good young center back as well. No one who really affects the first team has come in. No one who really affects the first team goes out, except Harry Wilson. But I think from what I've been reading, Klopp values him and thinks his future is at Anfield. I just think he wants him to get some sort of Premier League experience under his belt, which he doesn't have yet. So I think next year he'll be back. I thought he might have stayed this year, but it doesn't look to be the case. But everyone is back fit, mostly coming back from last year. The run-in, missing a couple players. Chamberlain, who's back. Keita, who missed. after the first Barcelona game, missed the rest of the season. He's mostly fit as well, so we'll see. I thought they were gonna buy possibly a left back, which they haven't, which as a Liverpool fan scares me just a bit. Right back is okay, center back is okay. None of the four center backs left. I thought one of Matip and Lovren would have left, but it looks like they're both sticking around, which is good. And the team itself is good. I think the only missing piece is that we have no attack-minded midfielders. And we'll see if they go for that sort of thing next year. I think Chamberlain can fit into that role, and he was definitely playing that role pretty well before he went out hurt. So we'll see as we go forward. But no major signings, and I'm picking them to finish second behind City, mainly because as a Liverpool fan watching it, we had a lot of late kind of winners. Toward the end of the year there, we were obviously, in the Premier League, it's almost like you come in after, City win their game, and it's almost deflating that they keep on winning. You lose one game all year, and I imagine it was deflating toward the end there, and sometimes the body language in games that were tied right around the 70-minute mark, it drops just a little bit, but the team spirit is really, really good. We'll just see if they can go ahead, push some of the luck aside, make sure we don't have any major injuries. But I have a hard time believing we're going to overtake City this year. I think when this happens, I think it will be next year. We'll see what they do transfer-wise. No money this year spent. We'll see if they spend a load next year or just look to upgrade it all next year. I just think we need a bit of depth just to go the full year without pushing our front three to a point where they're exhausted. I would have liked another striker as well, perhaps, but we'll see what happens from next window. But for now, this team is still really, really good, incredibly good, and they were better than City, especially in that second half during the Community Shield. Lost on penalties, but we'll see. I'm not so sure, though, with all the talent, with all the goals City get, that they'll go ahead and finish above them. So Liverpool second, and that brings us to Manchester City, who will, I think, win the league once again. Very, very, very good team. Obviously won it just at the end of the year, had to keep on winning, but obviously won the domestic treble. First team to ever win the domestic treble. There are just too many options. The money is there to have really good options off the bench. And it's just one of those things where the players are really, really good. The only weakness they had last year, I think, was no backup to Fernandinho, which they've solved dramatically with a really good player in Rodri. So I have a hard time seeing weaknesses. Left back, well, I'm not so sure where we're going to, or what they're going to do at the wing back positions. I could have swore Cancelo was a right back, and they've had Kyle Walker. I'm not sure if one will play one side and one will play the other, or Zinchenko will continue to play. If Zinchenko does continue to play, I guess he's the weakest link. But the defense, really, if you go at them, is probably their weakest link. But not too many teams go at City. So it's one of those weaknesses you can kind of pave over when you're not playing a big team that needs points. So we'll see. But I think City upgraded in the only position that really, really needed it, and bringing in Rodri, and I just don't see them losing too many games. They've got some really, really good players. Actually, no, that I'm just remembering, Angelino was bought in at left back, so they have plenty of talent at left back. Angelino is a good buy. They had that buyback clause in him. They've probably, even if he doesn't work out this year, they can probably sell him on for a pretty decent profit. So they do have the left back, and that's And that's on me. I completely forgot about that. But that sees that position solved. And as we were saying anyway, their only really glaring weakness was no backup for Fernandinho, and that's been solved with a really good player in Rodri anyway. So nothing major with City, no humongous changes, other than swapping out Danilo and Cancelo, but there's just too much talent there, and it's just not too much to say. I like them to win the league, and we'll see how they do in the Champions League, but I imagine that's their main focus. They really want to win that tournament. But that is how we see the league panning out. Number 1 through number 20. It's just one of those things. As a Liverpool fan, it's tough to see City win another one, especially how close we were last year, but we'll see. The battle for 4th should be pretty decent. What made last year's battle for 4th pretty funny, and this year's battle for 4th I think will be pretty funny too, is that these teams aren't super good, aren't really good, so they keep dropping points all over the place, so at least it'll make it semi-exciting. And the bottom 6 or 7 teams all have reasons why they stay up, and I think they all have reasons why they will go down. So it should be a fun year in the Premier League. Hopefully we have another good title race, and hopefully we have good races all over the table, and hopefully we have some fun stuff going into the season. The season starts tomorrow, and hopefully we have a bit of fun. We'll jump in and check just a couple more things. I think leading scorer, is actually going to be Salah again. We'll see about that. He won it, or he was tied with Mane and Aubameyang, but he also had a huge drought. I'm not so sure that happens again. Him and Mane are, how do we say it? They get down on themselves when they don't score for 2 or 3 games in a row, and then it becomes visible that they're trying too hard. If they don't go through any of those stretches, I think Salah wins the Golden Boot. Aguero will be up there. I think Kane will be up there as well, but we'll see. I think the best transfer of the window is Ndombele. I think he took a position that was kind of iffy sometimes. There are some good players in there, but he upgraded that wildly with Ndombele, and in this market at a pretty decent price as well. That is my best signing of the window. Weirdest signing I thought was David Luiz. Champions League, and from what I've been reading, he was told that he wasn't going to play too much, and then he was just like, fine, well, get me out of here. Arsenal needed a bit of help back there. I don't think this is a great transfer for Arsenal. I don't think this is smart from Chelsea, who are under a transfer ban, so I think this is a bit of an odd transfer for me, so we'll see where that ends up. Worst signing, I think we're going to go back to... I really want to go back to Tottenham. I think Sessegnon is not great. They've paid a lot of money for him, $25 million. He had a really not so great year at Fulham. And it's not because Fulham were bad. You can just watch him play, and there was just a lot of his play that wasn't very good. The step up was too much for him. Putting him in a better team, maybe, but we'll have to see. I'm not so sure that this is a good signing. I think Iwobi, for the money that was paid, isn't a great signing. I think they've overstretched a little bit. I know the manager said that he was one of their targets for a while, but I think he was their secondary target to Zaha, and I think they've just panicked a little bit and wanted to bring someone in, and they've overpaid for Iwobi at $35 million. So there are a couple transfers in there I don't particularly like, but we'll obviously have to wait and see before they get going, guys. But I hope you folks have enjoyed this. We'll revisit this at the end of the year, perhaps. But for now, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more. and peace.